What Matthew described as the dysfunction in several areas of the EU is entirely due to the fact of enlargement. The bigger it got in terms of numbers, the more difficult it becomes to make it operative.
Second speaker for the opposition, Jim Sillars. Jim often finds himself at odds with his colleagues, as suggested by the title of his autobiography, A Difference of Opinion, but this is because he is admired for his intellect and honesty, placing principle above party loyalty. After serving in the Royal Navy, Jim became a fireman, and through working in the Fire Brigades Union, he joined the Labour Party and was elected as an MP in 1970. However, he broke away from the party based on the issue of Home Rule, forming the Scottish Labour Party in 1976. In 1980, he joined the Scottish National Party and became deputy leader in 1991. He served as the MP for Glasgow Government from 1988 to 1992 and remains a powerful pro-independence voice, even if he is critical, occasionally, of SNP leadership. In 2016, he campaigned in favour of the Brexit and has been a long-standing Eurosceptic. Jim, the floor is yours.
I have always had a principal objection to the European Economic Community, then the European Community, and now the European Union, because I'm a working class socialist. And as I said at a Labour Party conference in 1974, the problem for me is that the Treaty of Rome enshrines the right of capital over labour. And in judgments of the European Court of Justice, when capital has been imposed on labour, that court has come down, as I expected, and legally, on the side of capital. However, that's not what I'm going to argue tonight. I am not going to argue the Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings, Nigel Farage case against the EU and for Brexit. I approach it as a Scot, interested in Scottish independence and where an independent Scotland will find itself in relation to Europe. Because there's not just the European Union, there is another organisation in Europe called the European Free Trade Association, made up principally of Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein. In 1975, after the EEC referendum, I wrote a paper arguing for Scotland to be independent in Europe. That was then the pre-runner to the European Union. I didn't conceive of any way that the UK or Scotland could come out of that organisation. Nobody listened in 75, but by 1985, I was a member of the SNP, and they adopted the policy of independence in Europe. And that the reason for the word independence, as at that time, even when it went from 6 members to 9 to 10 to 15, the national veto was in place, so that no majority could impose upon a minority a policy against their national interests. However, and I think this is where the European Union made a catastrophic error. What Matthew described as the dysfunction in several areas of the EU is entirely due to the fact of enlargement. The bigger it got in terms of numbers, the more difficult it becomes to make it operative. And the ultimate in that was the Lisbon Treaty, where in 45 areas of policy, the veto that was held by individual states was removed for the very complicated qualified majority voting. Now, for me, that was unacceptable. Still, at that time, Scotland's part of the UK, part of the EU. I didn't expect it, but along came an opportunity called the Brexit vote. Now, I work on this principle, that of course you can trade sovereignty to an international organisation. But the test is the transfer of that sovereignty worth the advantage that you actually have? Well, the Lisbon Treaty, for me, from a Scottish point of view, is no, because we don't have the kind of veto that we had when I originated the idea of independence in Europe. So, at the Brexit vote, I argued for Brexit, not for the same reasons as Boris Johnson, but to get the UK out so that Scotland would get out and give us the opportunity to join the other organisation, the European Free Trade Association, which has, under the EEA Act of 1994, access to the European single market. Now, there are strings attached to that. You must have free movement of capital and all the rest of it, but EFTA has absolute free entrance to the single market. The difference is this between EFTA and the EU. The European Union wants to become an economic and political organisation, a polity on its own. EFTA is only concerned with trade. Other aspects of life, foreign policy, defence, home affairs, social justice, social security, are all responsibilities of the individual states, and there are no aspects of vetoes. They operate on the basis of consensus. So if I'm talking, as I am, in the context of Scottish independence, and I'm a small country, do I want to become a minnow in an organisation of 27 other states? By the way, going to 36 because there's 9 applicants in the pipeline at the present time? Or do I want to be, like Norway, a very substantial sovereign state with access to a market for my trade? In my view, if you look at the test, which is best in terms of the transfer of sovereignty for advantage? For a small country like Scotland, it is not the European Union. The test takes us to the European Free Trade Association. So that's a different argument from my colleagues on that side and on this side. And in case you think Scottish independence isn't coming, I've got news for you. At the moment, we stand at 47%, according to Professor Curtis, who's the expert. You can forget about the SNP. People make a mistake of believing independence means the SNP. Below and outside of the SNP, there are organisations now planning to campaign for the Westminster election in 28-29, when the system of first past the post will redound to our favour. So I look forward, even though I'll be 91, in voting at that particular time for us to get the lever for independence. And then when the Scots are free and have to make up their decision, do they go to the EU or the European Free Trade Association? I hope the test that myself and others have set before the Scottish people will point us in a different direction from the European Union.
Excellent. Thank